Doc, the next question is from Monica Wadhwani of Prestige Institute. She just finished her MBA. What's the one word which defines India of today? As a young entrepreneur, what one thing should I keep in mind?
Well, diversity would be my answer. I think our marketing gurus have come up with Incredible India. Incredible India is a great tourist slogan. I like it, and it shows how much there is about India to astonish people. Though as somebody working in the real world of India, I also want the incredible India to be balanced by a credible India that actually gets things done and does them right. But if you were to speak about the one thing about India, it's always difficult to pick just one. I would pick diversity. We are a land of the most astonishing diversity. As I wrote in my book, India from Midnight to the Millennium, we have no country in the world has a greater variety of topographical and climatic differences, geographical and ethnic differences, linguistic differences, religious differences. We have a country with, God knows, 922 political parties listed by the Election Commission. We've got all the four major religions, 6 different systems of classical dance, and 300 ways of cooking the aloo. I mean, we are a land of absolutely rich diversity. And that diversity means a consciousness that there can never be a one-size-fits-all solution to India. That in India, there is no one way. There are multiple ways of doing things, of seeing things, of understanding things. And that through that experience, India offers you the ability, it seems to me, to adjust, to constantly think flexibly. Whether it's, if you're marketing a product in one part of India, you may market it differently in another part of India. Whether you're meeting a person of a particular region or language or culture or religion, you may have to behave in a different way from what you would do somewhere else with a friend. These constant adjustments actually make Indians much more flexible, much more adaptable, and particularly well suited for international assignments. Because we are doing in India what foreigners don't have to do in their countries and find it difficult to adjust to when they go abroad to other countries. Indians tend to be very good at international service, whether in the private sector or in the intergovernmental sector, because we are used to growing up with diversity and we adjust very well to it.
Sir, after taking 3 straight questions from the women manager, I'm tempted, mere for the balancing sake, to take next question from a male counterpart. And incidentally, this question comes from a former diplomat himself, ex-IG of police, and a very good friend and a senior colleague of us at Endowment Management Association, Mr. Vinay Agnihotri. Sir, he states that you have been a very successful and distinguished diplomat at highest level yourself. You would have exchanged views with your counterparts of various other countries. What's the perceptual difference do you find of the then India and the now India amongst the world leaders?
Huge difference, Mr. Agnihotri. I think that when I first went abroad, which is a little before, I think, your first assignment abroad, I found that we were either a vast area of ignorance, that people did not simply know anything about India, or that what they had was just a received wisdom of, frankly, a poverty-stricken nation, mendicants with begging bowls, naked fakirs lying on beds of nails, a chap with a loincloth climbing up a rope, or at best, a Maharaja on a caparisoned elephant. I mean, there was nothing in between. There was no consciousness of Indians like the ones in this room. That was simply not there. And there's been a dramatic sea change in the perception. For 2 reasons mainly, I think, looking at least the Western perception of India. The first has been the prevalence and success of Indian immigrants in these countries. In places like America, for example, where you find that Indians are thriving everywhere. There was a television show called ER that was set in a hospital waiting room, emergency room. And in the first times it came out, there were a lot of negative reviews saying, this is totally unrealistic. How can you have a hospital emergency room without an Indian doctor? And they actually had to write a part for an Indian doctor and cast it because people were so used to seeing Indian doctors. Or that the prominence of Indians in various aspects of American life has suddenly made people aware of India much more. And this is an important factor in people's perception. But the other has been our outstanding success in IT and everything from starting companies in Silicon Valley to our own work in India in doing offsourcing, business process outsourcing in this country, using our skills in IT, in software development. When Y2K was supposed to happen, that all the computers in the world were going to crash when 2000 came along, and Indian software programmers everywhere went and wrote all the code. Suddenly people woke up and suddenly thought of Indians as these smart, highly educated, mathematically gifted people. But now the opposite danger is happening. Every Indian in the Western world is assumed to be either a software guru or a computer geek. In fact, a friend of mine who, like me, did his honors degree in history, was accosted at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam by an anxiously perspiring European who said, "You're Indian, can you help me fix my laptop?" so there is a danger too that this other image may be going. I mean, it's striking though that now Indians are seen as synonymous with mathematical excellence, IT skills, that IITs are spoken of in America now with the same reverence that MIT was. And so the branding of India in today's terms has changed very significantly and positively.
Thank you, sir. And before I go on with my next question, friends, may I have a huge round of applause for our next speaker who has just walked in, D. Shiv Kumar, Managing Director, Nokia Asia Pacific. Warm welcome to you, sir. Sir, I'm merging two questions here. It's from Mr. B.N. Gupta of Flexitef International and Dr. S.L. Kale of IAPS Academy. What's your take on censorship of internet, especially social network in India? The extended parties, and if you allow me to be candid, sir, here, the question reads, does your resignation from the Union Council of Ministers indicate that in the Indian political system, plain speaking is a big demerit and sycophancy a big, big merit, even in 21st century?
Somebody clearly wants to get me into further trouble today.
Sir.
Well, look, on the first part of the question, censorship is unacceptable. We are a democracy. Freedom of expression is fundamental. I already believe we have too many restrictions. Unlike most other democracies, in India, in the Constitution, freedom of expression is not an absolute right. It is circumscribed under various categories, which fortunately have not been implemented by governments except during the emergency. But technically, our freedom of expression in India, under the Constitution, can be limited by the government of the day for a whole list of reasons, including national security, relations with foreign states, communal harmony, various things. There is a whole list. And it's actually a much more restrictive list than we realize, because fortunately, no government, as I said, except for those 22 months of the emergency, no government has attempted to qualify our rights or to censor our press. And we are a very free country. In fact, I'm proud of the fact that there is a wider range of expression available in our public print, particularly, not so much obviously in the audiovisual media, but in our public print press and in our political process. A wide range of freedom of expression is available. But I know the question lies before us because of what happened a week, 10 days ago when Kapil Sibal was accused of asking for censorship. And I was asked on Twitter about this, and I had said already that even though I myself have been the victim of a lot of unfair, frankly dishonest and false attacks, I still would not want to censor it because that's a much more bigger danger for our country. But when they said, well, in that case, what do you think of what Kapil Sibal is accused to have done? I said, I won't answer until I speak to him myself. And I did speak to him. And I spoke to him, and he said, this is completely not true. I have not asked for censorship. And in any case, it's not about political matters, which is what was being alleged, that he wanted to censor something derogatory about our party leaders and so on. He said it wasn't about that. And he mentioned and described to me, when we spoke, a couple of things that had been brought to his attention on the internet that, had they been seen by certain people, could have truly been dangerously communally inflammatory. And he said he had asked people like Facebook and so on to take these things down, because they, if seen, could have generated literally violence, violent reaction, a riot, whatever. To my mind, that had to be understood in our society. We are sadly a society in which people are prepared to get inflamed over these matters. And sadly, we have seen riots, we've seen lives being lost over particularly deliberate communal provocations. So it seems to me that just as in America, for example, no one would publicly use the N word for a black American because it would be considered deeply offensive. Similarly, in our society, there must be some things that people are not going to say about other communities, other religious groups and their prophets and their gods and so on. And if people are still irresponsible enough to say it, then there is an argument to be made that those who are responsible for providing that service should remove the post. And there I must say I did not disagree. I was attacked almost as much as Kapil Sibal was for saying this. But having heard the examples which are not fit to be repeated here, I did feel that he had a point and it was not an invalid point. But it cannot be pre-censorship as was wrongly reported in the media. With 100 million internet users in India alone, you can post anything you like. But if you post something that can truly be inflammatory, insulting and hurtful to people for things they can't help, like their religion or their appearance, I think we should definitely take it down. And that is not censorship in my view, that is common sense. Just as, I mean, if I can use a very blunt example, women in their bikinis can take off their tops in places like Copacabana or Bondi Beach or Saint-Tropez, but if you tried to do that in Goa, you would risk assault or arrest. There are cultural differences in the world, and we do have certain challenges in India, which any responsible government has to take account of. It is not censorship. It must not be ever done for political reasons, but we have to understand why some of this may be necessary. On your second point, I just want to say very simply, I don't want to get into issues relating to why and how and wherefore I decided to resign at the time that I did. But as you've seen, I am still very active politically, particularly in my constituency, but also in Parliament. And I don't believe that I have spoken any less frankly when I have chosen to speak.